now it's time for our next panel discussion. And can I remind everyone that if they do have some questions that pop up in the course of the panel, please pop them in the Q&A chat box. And our moderator will be able to answer those questions if he has some time, or if not, our experts on the panel will get around to them once the panel is concluded. So can I now hand over to our moderator? We're going to be talking about data again. We're moving on from that subject on another angle. We're going to be talking about data sharing. And I'd like to introduce our moderator, Craig Wishart. He's the Chief Information Officer at KPMG Australia. Craig, over to you.
Lachlan, thank you. And also thank you to CDOTrends and Jonathan for the opportunity to have such a great panel today. Also, really insightful presentation there from David from Glassbox. So on the panel today, as you can see, Kashira, Chief Data Officer at Latitude Financial Services. We've got Albert from Mirvac, Denis from the Wilson Group, and Seychelle from Tamer. So, this week we had a conversation with the group around where do we think most interest is heading in the data. And we thought we'd target specifically around how do you communicate to executives? How do you communicate to boards? Data strategy. What could we do more data with, with data? And also, what are some of the risks? So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate between the group. We've got those questions that'll come out. And in the chat, if you do have some questions, please direct them at the panel. I think, Albert, we might start with you. We hear this a lot, right? Data is the new oil. What does that actually mean? And could you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, like for me, I think when I hear of that a lot, because with many organizations, there were some perceptions that, it's just another tech. It's something that's kind of optional, nice to have. But again, as we all see it, we all make business decisions and we all need to be informed. And when data is a new oil, and a lot of my experience is when we really truly need to integrate kind of data in everyday decision making. So it's fully augmented. It's not like, there's the whole great divorce, but it has to be fully integrated, just like a car, an engine and an oil. It's fully integrated.
Yeah, terrific. So, Shell, you talk about things such as, treating data as an asset. And to become truly data-driven, you've got to embed that in the organisation and the culture. What advice for you have you got for people on the call who may be talking to their peers, their colleagues, their business leaders about data as an asset? What does that mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very relevant question. And even thinking about data as the new oil, data is only valuable, and especially oil, when you actually go through a whole process, right? This is not extracting oil and it's ready to use out of the ground. This is a process of extraction, refinement, right? Processing it, distributing it. It is a whole eco chain and a system and a pipeline to deliver from basically source to that use. And so in treating data as an asset, what we're really focused on saying is start with the business outcomes. Start with that central mission to say, what problem statement is my business facing that could be solved with better, high quality, timely data that's repeatable? We've heard about AI and everything else. Really, it's focused on the foundations of how do you actually build that, if you want to say, oil refinery pipeline from end to end, to really start to treat data as an asset along each chain and to make an impact on the business, get the ROI quickly so the business can see the ongoing value of investing in data, investing in infrastructure, investing in these resources that are required for very big digital transformation efforts.
Yeah, just to keep going with the analogies and the metaphors, but you don't want an oil spill either. We just heard before, there is so much data. How do you get your hands around it and how do you sift through and wade through? I think, Denis, perhaps for you this question, but how do you get your hands around this huge pool of oil, this huge pool of data, and how do you wade through that to create value?
And it's related to what Katie was saying. It's all about ROI and finding the right initiatives and the right priorities for the business. And it reminds me to one of the first roadmaps that I started delivering. And we identify the oil or the potential opportunity, and it was the first one. So I picked the biggest one, the one that it was most relevant for the business, but I didn't realize it was the most complex one. And then 6 months later, the business was still asking about it. How are you doing? Like, well, we extracted the oil and it's here and we are processing. So what I learned from there, and I do it from that moment, is that I try to be a bit more smart and pick up. Yes, you can. I aim for the biggest ROI, but also in the way try to deliver some value. Quick wins, people say. I say, it's gain momentum, so you can show some value on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, terrific. Kashira, what about we move on to this? A lot of people say, okay, this has been a terrific session, great commentary. Where do we start? For those people who are thinking about a data journey or building up a strategy or a plan that they want to communicate, is there one or two or three things you'd say, this is where you should start, this is where you should level set your thinking? What's the best way? What advice would you give for people who are trying to really get the organization to understand what they can do with data?
Yeah, so I think I've always, the first thing that I think about is working backwards. So instead of building it as a data strategy and a technology strategy, a lot of people end up building for building's sake. So if we can work backwards with the enterprise priority in mind on what do we want to do with this data, and then that honest questioning probably comes up with a totally different set of answers, and it helps set the right data strategy for the business where people can use it. So work backwards is one. Two, if it fails, it's okay to throw it and build something new. I think the mindset of wanting to stick with it and love it and give it humanize it and love it and give it affection is not true for any technology, but more so for data. A lot of people put some technology in and it doesn't work and they don't want to throw it away. So I always say it's okay to throw it away and start fresh or start new for something that's more relevant. And the third one is measure. So if you don't measure what you're delivering, at the end of 12 months, the board or the investors or whoever it is going to turn up and say, I've spent X million dollars in it. What's the value? And you will be scrambling to come up with value at the end of the 12-month the annual review. And nobody wants to hear it then. So can you provide measurement and messaging every month or whatever its frequency, so people can continuously see the accruing benefits? So those are the three things I would typically recommend if somebody's starting on this journey.
Great. Hey, Seychelles, can you have too much data? Can you have too much that you're trying to wade through? What's your thoughts there around how do you wade through what's there and really where's the the nuggets of gold, if you like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is kind of the don't boil the ocean. Don't think that you need to have every single data set where customer data is to actually start having something useful and needed. Identify the 2 to 3 sources you have, right? Start to harmonize it, start to bring it together, connect it, build that 360 view, get that foundation in place, and then add on as you go. This is speaking to the quick wins, right? To showing that agile development is start with what you know and have, and really put in that phase pipeline of progress report for yourself and for your team. These are hard if you're not showing quick wins to not only the business and to IT, but to your own team. Like it's going to get too hard because more obstacles are up to say, no, you can't have access to this or you can't do that, than to say, I need these 3 things to get started and to show a win. So start small. Don't even think about scale or anything else on day one. Think about what is actionable and ready to use today. Show that MVP, and then you can scale it quite quickly once you show that proof.
Yeah, great. And look, I guess this one, Albert, I might come to you on this one, but boards and executives have got a heightened awareness around cybersecurity. There's a lot of concern around data and how we protect data. Really interested in your views, at Mirvac, how you think about that, but how you communicate that to boards. What you can't see, you can't protect, but I'm also really interested in your views around data, security, privacy. What do you have to think about if you're in that space? If you're in a data space in a business, what do you got to think about?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good question, and particularly at Mirvac, where they're actually very topical. Very recently, we've had a lot of these conversations. Actually, everyone's because with cyber, and you can see there's a lot more considering, particularly in this virtual world. So I think and it's very important to put it into perspective. So what we've been telling them is having the balanced approach. Right, sort of, and at the moment, a lot of the cyber and the data security has been a bit overly defensive. But then, if we're kind of overly defensive with the data, not even sharing it, then that defeats the purpose about why do we even start the data journey in the first place, right? So having a balanced approach. But the other part is also we can leverage this kind of called cyber security analytics. I mean, this is a whole area, right? We can do analysis on our own analysis, right? Who accesses the data, what are the logs, and all that other stuff to ensure that everyone's comfortable about how everything's being used and shared properly across organizations.
Yeah, good. Denis, I'm going to step it up with a pretty tough question. So,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So perhaps I should have told you, but in Europe, I was just reading that they're going to put some legislation around narrow AI. and going beyond ROI? And where do you cross the border that suddenly maybe you know a little bit too much? And so the legislation is going to say there are certain things that you can gain from your data about your customers, about your people, but there's also going to be some borders that we're probably going to ask you not to cross. Where do you think AI is heading in terms of how far can AI go, do you think, before we really start to get into areas of greyness around privacy? You know, with the Wilson Group and what you do, what's your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. And a few months ago, I was talking before the lockdowns with some of the data, experts in another conference, and we were talking about GDPR, because GDPR already have some constraints for machine learning and AI. So you need to be able to explain in human language, so people can understand what that algorithm is doing and how those, results have been generated. So there is already something there that all professionals need to be aware in Europe. Where are we heading and how is this going to be handled? It's a really tough question. I don't know what to say, to be honest. We always work in a really thin line, to be honest, especially with marketing. What is intrusive? What is not intrusive? We are already crossing that line sometimes when, we call customers and say, well, I know you're going to leave the company based on my data. You're a risk. So I'm going to offer you a phone cheaper than, that normal price. Yep. So it's a tough question. I don't know what to say, to be honest, Craig. What is your experience in terms, because you've got a lot of experience in KPMG in that aspect. So
yeah, look, I think we see a lot of clients asking the question around how far can we go with the data? How far can we mine and drill down on this till we perhaps cross what might be borders of privacy? I think, if I come to you, Latitude Financial Services, right, you'd have a lot of information about your clients, and I suspect a lot of information around what you can and you cannot do. What's your thoughts on where AI is going in banking, and how can AI and data be leveraged to build the customer experience?
Instead of going into too many details, I'll just give one example.
Yeah.
Right? The biggest thing with banks is the banks treat their customers as accounts and not as people. So and I'm sure all of you understand what I mean. So you treat it as a credit card account, a home loan account, not as a customer, as a person. That's what retail companies do really well. So one aspect of AI, what we're trying to use, is to understand a customer across all her product holdings and treat her and give her the experience that she deserves as one person and everything, her financial needs across the financial spectrum of products. So that's one example of where we're using it. And there are more such examples, right? So what we're trying to do is take a taken for granted problem like that, treat people like accounts, or give people different experiences, or give people very personalized, give people everyone the same rates and the same offers, and turning that on its head and saying, wait a minute, we can apply the retail concepts here and give somebody a personalized rate before they apply, because we know what their credit score could be. We can treat somebody as one person, or we can give them a seamless experience. So those are the aspects we're using AI for in Latitude right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. And at Tamar, one of the other questions that, of course, often comes up is, and I'm sure boards and executives all ask you the same question: what's our plan and thinking over the next 3 to 5 years? And that's tough. But at Tamar, if you were asked that question, or people on this panel, from the listening in onto the panel, where's all this heading? So, Shell, if you had to sort of look out further, look out a couple of years, how do you think your role might change over the next couple of years? And this is a question I'll give to all of you. How do you think the role of those who are involved in data will evolve and change?
Yeah, I think that, right now there's still definitely that's a data problem, right? The throwing over the fence, this is someone else's problem, right? If I'm in the business, I have the problem, the report's broken, it's the data team's problem, right? If it's IT, it's not the data problem, it's the system problem, right? How do you harmonize the data? I think fundamentally is that every single individual in an organization will be a data owner, a data curator, and a data knowledge broker. This is where everyone needs to be able to have that true data democratization, where everyone's helping inform and provide better data and feedback, and having the processes in place so that you can actually marry all the things we're talking about, like AI, with that human guided touch, right? Humans are still valuable, and knowing the data, contextualizing the data, and making it work for their business line. So how do you create that approach from, you know, the person as the DBA all the way up to the CEO to actually say we all have an ownership and a contribution to make towards making our data better and towards really making it that lifeblood for better decision making for, you know, our employees, for our customers, for our vendors, product suppliers. So it's across the board, is really thinking about that vision of data democratization and ownership from everyone across the org. And then on the technologist side, is that's really saying, you know, where are we coming in to actually help bring in this, you know, human plus machine? I think more and more AI type of technologies are coming into play. Is where is that boundary? How do you have transparency, right? How do you have validation? How do you have everyone involved? I think the question in the chat was, how do you build trust? You keep the human in the loop always across each of these different paths and make everyone that owner and feeling accountable and proud of what you can do by having better data.
Great. Albert, data democratization, we hear a lot about this. What's your thoughts on that and where is it heading?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a similar, I think, to the points mentioned. You know, as I've mentioned, people and data needs to be augmented. So we've given people the tools and technologies to be able to be part of the process. So I think that's very, very crucial. We can't have the whole great divide. Is probably the thing. We need to build a bridge. But beyond that, we can even build not just a bridge. We can build a network. I call this a whole, you know, data collaboration. For example, I know that Mervac, for example, collaborating with KPMG, we're building this thing called a building assurance solution to about the trustworthiness of the index, which means we are sharing data. So when we talk about this, you know, everyone talks about the solution and I'm on this stack and only, but which is okay, but it's more about how we can share that and make that compatible with everybody as well. I think that's one of the trends that's very, very important, and with various external data as well that we have around the place. So.
Great. Sure, I'm going to come to you. Citizen developer. Everyone's a developer. We hear this a lot now as we start to upskill people in businesses, teaching them and bringing them into businesses where they can do more without having to engage the technology team or the data team. What's your thoughts on where that's heading as a discipline, as a practice, a way of businesses operating? This concept of everyone is using data, everyone's using technology. What's your thoughts where that's heading?
Yep. So again, that brings me to your first question, right, on the oil question. So if you take the same analogy, it's to get oil, you need to do 3-4 things. So let's just say 3 things. 1, you need to know where to bring the oil and put it into a reservoir. 2, you need to know how to turn that oil into petroleum. And 3, you need to know how to sell it. So let's say the same concept of data engineering, bringing your own data science or analytics, applying intelligence at scale, and reporting and sharing that data. So what is happening when people talk about democratization is they just talk about the last part, which is people building their own dashboards, but that's not what it's truly about. People should be allowed to bring their own data in. And when you let people bring their own data in, when I say this, I immediately say this, data engineers are going to panic and architects are going to panic and say, wait a minute, don't let people bring in. And my typical answer to that is catalogs, tools like Tamer and other tools that are there in the market, which will then tag them the appropriate way. So people can see who's brought it in, how much can you trust it, and how credible are they? So that lets people bring their tools, data in. And we do have the technology right now where data engineering has become a service rather than a discipline. So people can do it. The same thing with machine learning as a service, quite a few tools out there where people can do their own machine learning. Again, it's bottlenecked by not knowing which data to trust, how to know it's the right data to, and how can you share it with people? So if you can solve that problem, one of trust and credibility, all these things have the right tools. It's just that they don't have the supporting mechanisms for them. And once we have them at scale, this will truly become a citizen capability.
Fantastic. And Denis, from your perspective, how do you see that maturing?
Yeah, I agree. I think we are all really aligned. I think there are twofold. As you were saying, the technology, the data engineers, and I'm with you, they shouldn't get scared, but I think more and more systems are creating their tools and the software already open for data and, export and import. So it will be easier and the business will be able to extract the data from the tools that they are using without the need of any data engineer or, the involvement of the BI team. And at the same time, I think they will be able, like everyone knows how to use Excel, everyone will be able to create their own, insights. I think the role for the BI team will be more kind of like an Apple store where developers create their own apps and then send it to Apple and they check, they validate that they have quality and they're following the right processes and it's It's not going to break production. Might be something like that. I see a lot of natural language in the future, I think, Q&As. I don't know if reports and dashboards are going to be that much used, static reports and dashboards. I think it's going to be more like the wall. The wall is moving fast. So you need answers and questions, and you need it now. You don't need, to spend time trying to put all together. So I think it will be more like, give me the answer for this question. What if I do this? What is going to happen with my, pricing and revenue or gross margin? So I think it's going to be more dynamic. The BI team will be more into the quality, and probably the advanced analytics, more difficult kind of analytics and predictives and machine learning. Yeah.
Terrific. In a world where all parts of the business are competing for investment, the question I'm going to ask you is, I think, one that most of us always struggle with. We have to put a bit of time into it, which is, if we had a couple of minutes with the board or the executive teams within our businesses and we had to make a pitch, why what we do is important. Why should we be investing more in the way in which we manage, we curate our data? I'm going to ask you to give something to everybody who's on the call that they can write down and say, I think I can use some of that or mold it. I'll start with, say, Shell on this one, then go to Albert, Kashira, but what would be your pitch? You've got a couple of minutes with the board. People are listening in going, gee, I'm up next week. I've got to make a pitch on this. I need to tell them why it's important. What would be something to give people that would help them?
Yeah, I think sometimes using by analogy for what is working, and this is where I think digital natives are actually showing how far a lot of the legacy incumbents need to catch up. Selling by analogy to say, look how Netflix is targeting you with that right movie and autoplays within 15 seconds of another movie ending, right? How can you basically start to create your message to say, with a defined data strategy that's outcome focused, where we have an agile step-by-step process to build, you're de-risking it. You're saying, this is when I'm going to deliver results by when, and where we're ultimately going is showing them the end goal, but demystifying the process. Again, don't boil the ocean, give them that clear path. And I think also realizing is that there's a lot of authority that you bring coming in. One of our most successful customers, this was a new CDO role that had been created. And he requested to meet directly with the CEO and board before even taking the job, and said, I need to have data access to every single source system that we have for me to take this job, right? Removing the blockers that are going to make you successful as well, and making sure you come to the table with your asks, because you've already seen how hard this is, where it's going to fail. Having your key asks outlined, and we usually find with our customers, it's data access being the most critical. With all of the InfoSec rules and requirements, they all serve a place and a role, but making sure that you have executive mandate to drive this strategy forward from the top down. So come prepared with your asks as well, and being the authority in this space to really drive it forward. I think from the outside technologist view, you have a lot more ownership and knowledge, and really being able to say you can take the business truly to the next level to go compete with the likes of the Googles, the Amazons, the Netflix, the Facebooks, if we implement on this type of strategy, but this is what I need to do so.
Yeah. Great advice. Albert, from your perspective, a couple of minutes with the board, the executive team, making a pitch. What can we give people who are listening in that would help them also construct their own pitch?
Yeah, I think it's about, again, perspectives. I think it's about letting the board know everyone breathes digital and data. So it's actually not an option. I'm like, it's not like we live outside of that. Sometimes that's the thing, right? It's like that analogy. The fish forget they're actually swimming in the water. When I think it's giving them a good perspective, and obviously, letting them know how we're going to approach it. Sort of, and for me, there are two main things. One is again making it to the board that what we deliver is user friendly. Because obviously everyone is afraid it's like some big budgets, big technology. And again, we've had many failures in the past on data projects. So it's all about the user, it's all about the customer as well. But also that thin slices delivery, right? It's about, we're not just going to go away, we come back in 1 year and here we go, voila. It's going to be a collaboration effort with everybody, co-creation and showing them results as we go. So I think if we give them the good perspectives and how we approach it, I think that should give them a bit more comfort to progress.
Right. Yeah, we don't have failures, do we? We just have something else we proved wasn't the right path. So, Kashira, just over to you. Can you have a business strategy without a data strategy?
No, so the business strategy comes first, and the data strategy supports the business strategy. I think it underpins what the business wants to do, and data for me is just like and a good context, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this much more, Craig, is maybe 15, 20 years ago, there used to be a separate team that took care of computers and working on computers. Now we don't have separate teams working on computers. Everybody uses a computer to get stuff done. That's how data is going to be. So it's just another tool or an asset that everyone needs to do. So it's finance plus data, or marketing plus data, or operations plus data. So it's just a plus thing, and that's what's going to happen. So, and to your other question on what the board wants, if you don't mind me answering that one, I think the only thing that the board wants to see, or only three things the board wants to see, is you're a capable management team. You can walk the talk, and you have a vision for what happens. And I've always seen when I go to the board and as representatives of owners and shareholders, you show them, did you see this decision was made? We built this, and show an example of this, something that the CEO did. That's all they want to see. In that 2 minutes, they just want to see that somebody made a good decision and you helped make that decision. That's all they want to see. How it happened, what all technology goes into it, no one cares. So that's how I think about it.
20 years ago, I was gainfully employed writing applications for Nokia, Motorola, and Ericsson handsets. Can you believe it? 20 years. Denis.
Yeah, happy to answer the question about the board, but
please.
No, I completely agree with every one of you. So be prepared. Just to summarize, I agree with be prepared. You need to understand the business. They need to trust you. And the best way to trust you is knowing the business, knowing the challenge, knowing the opportunities. I always use a little bit, I like to scare them, and it's not like it's a real scare, but I like to show them what the competitors are doing. That's the best way to convince the board for me, is to show them a little bit of what they are doing and, scare them. So for example, I don't know, like this competitor is got 3 speakers in this AI conference, and we have not invested in AI. We don't even do, this and that. So we need to be careful with what these guys are doing. And obviously talk about the customers, what the customers want. But I agree with Srira as well. You need to walk the talk, and so that, that you deliver, you walk the talk. Yeah.
Yep. Education and training. Going forward, we spoke before about how important and more intrinsically linked data is going to be to business strategy. And we said democratization of data, education and training. I might start with you, Albert. How important is that going to be for people who are embarking on this journey to help people understand how you use data? You need education, right? You need training, you need awareness. How do you think about that at Mirvac? How do you get the message out, take away some of the mystery, if you like, and help people understand how they can use data?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think adoption, education, and evangelization is very key, because bit of backstory. I used to teach a lot and did a lot of tutoring back in the younger days. But same, when I talk with a lot of the business users here at Mirvac, there is a perception that it's really, really hard. It's like they have to do lots and lots of coding, but it's a myth, right? Helping them debunk it. And really just showing them care as well, and taking them through the journey as well. Because, there's the perception that you just deliver and you run and you go to another project at the typical classical, technology projects. But we're like showing, no, we're here for the long run. And then the adoption is as important as the delivery. And that's what I tell everyone at the team as well. So that's very important to develop our DNA.
Yeah. What about Atema? How do you handle it there? How do you think through? You spoke about it being an evangelist, being somebody who can advocate for. I'm really curious. What do you do at Atema to help drive it through the organization?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We're on the other side coming with this, AI type of solution. And they're like, the robots are coming to take my jobs, right? And like, we're not the robots coming to take your job by any stretch. We're here to supplement and augment and really let humans be free of, we call it the data janitorial work, to go do the high value add knowledge skills. But the problem is that right now organizations aren't mapping what someone's title today is and how that maps to the future and the skills and the training that are going to take them to get to be this true data steward and what that means. And so when Tamer comes in, we're not trying to say we're going to take your job away. We're not doing redundancies here. We're actually going to free you up to be a much more higher value add employee and contributor to the company, but showing that bridge for how their skill sets as well as their title is actually going to evolve in the organization is critical. And Tamer really tries to contribute to part of that training for how they can run faster and do more by having tools like ours that are purpose built to solve a real problem that's actually just a drag coefficient for the whole organization right now.
I've got a question to the panel. So either Denis or Shiri, you can pick this one up, but AI, augmented or artificial? Where are we in sort of our thinking around augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence?
I think typically say there are three versions of AI, not two. There's automation, augmentation, and application. So automation is what we really do very well, and augmentation is where we should stop. Application works only do well in curation or personalization or extreme instances like that, but pretty much all key decision making. I think, like Tamer mentioned, the human in the loop, the augmentation is where I think it should stop unless we define what the ethics around it are and how we use it. That's my take on it.
Denis, so the robot's got to take our jobs? Is that what's going to happen?
No, as Seychelles was saying, it's going to let us do more value add tasks. And that happened a lot in our space. People are, especially in the business, scared of us because they think that they're not going to be useful for the business anymore. But it's the other way around. We are going to remove all of these repetitive tasks, low value tasks that you don't really enjoy, and we're going to let you do your job, which is, adding value to the business, analyzing those insights and generating insights actually, and value to the business. So, but it will change. People will need to adapt, like in every single chain when we introduce computers and internet. So, but it's going to be better.
It's going to be better. All right, we're going to talk very quickly as we sort of get towards the end, but cloud often comes up, different service providers. When you're looking for somebody to help you in that data space, without naming them, of course, but what do you look for in a SaaS provider and a cloud service provider? I might start again with Albert, but what are the couple of things you're looking for? And I think people are also interested in what's your view on how do you secure it? How do you work with a cloud provider to ensure that your data is secure? So I might start there, and then we'll head over to Seychelles and then to Kishore and then to Denis. Albert.
Yeah, look, for me, when looking into what are the cloud providers, again, very important that for us, we need to understand what do we want from our data process. So what's in our data process, and let the technology, where does the technology fit in there? Because no technology is perfect, right? And then obviously then there would be parts where we will supplement with some business process, and that's fine. So I think that's for me, it's one of the very important category. And then the other one is, again, as I mentioned sort of earlier, is that compatibility with other ecosystems, because these days there's so many different tools out there. So and technology advances very rapidly. So it's very important that the tool has compatibility with other solutions within the data ecosystem. I think those are the two key ones that I really consider to be able to do that. Actually, there's the last one, sorry, I just thought about it. Scalability, because the whole idea is, the more once we use it, we know successful, trust me, we'll put so much things on there. So we have to understand that the way the technology works will allow for that. I think that's another very, very key important aspect.
So, Shao, you spoke before about trust. I'm really curious here. How important is trust versus capability? Can you separate them of the cloud provider?
Yeah, I think that when I look at this, and we work very closely, we work with all of the hyperscalers, is, when we look at that versus a lot of these on-premise solutions, is that they're actually doing more on the security side than any on-premise solution. The reason being is that they're under attack, thousands, tens of thousands of times a day trying to be breached. Google's a good example of that. They've put in best-in-class security. When we look at actually the public clouds, we don't even think security. We actually think it's more secure than when we've actually seen issues in in on-premise type of environments. That's only becoming more and more apparent even in the news with all of the hacks that we're seeing. I think when we think about saying, think about the cloud, is that it's going to be multi-cloud. It's also going to probably still be a mixture of cloud and some on-premise. Somebody asked a question in the chat, is like, how do you mitigate your footprint, right? And basically having this huge volume of data. You're going to have some environments where it's a hot, live, ready, streaming environment. And then you're going to have some that can be cataloged and stored and maybe are there for regulatory and compliance reasons. Really figuring out what your data is needed for, when and why. And different cloud providers do different things better in different parts of the value chain and for different data types. So that interoperability that Albert mentioned is critical. So it doesn't matter if you work with a solution provider like a Tamer, if you're working with a visualization tool, if you're working with a database, make sure they're interoperable, because your data stack is going to continue to evolve and change, and really to keep up with your business needs. So make sure that data is exchangeable, make sure that you own your data, and that you have control over the direction of how you want to change that architecture over time, because you will. There's always new technologies coming in. You should keep everyone honest and making sure that we're staying at the forefront of what our technology is purpose-built to solve and to do. And that's really bringing in that trust factor of, again, if something isn't, delivering on that solution, easily rip them out. That's what's been hard with those monolithic systems of yesteryear. Rip them out, replace them with something better that drives to your needs.
Got it. Organizations have a lot of chiefs. Sure, we've got chief technologies officers and chief data officers and chief information officers and chief risk officers. I can just keep going. How do CDOs, this will be the last part of our wrap up, but how do CDOs work in with CTOs and CIOs? What's the relationship they need to have? I know, and excuse the pun, right? But there are too many chiefs and too few Indians is often the joke, and that happens a lot in the technology space. A CTO reporting to a CIO, or a CDO reporting to the CTO and stuff like that definitely happens. But in my context, I typically look at the CDO as the CFO, but data as the currency. So if you think about it from that lens, the CDO stops becoming a technical role and starts becoming an enablement role. You have a finance role, and finance helps people know what to buy and how much to buy and what you can spend on. The same with data. What can you use data on? And it stops becoming a technology conversation and starts becoming an organizational enablement conversation. So that's how I think about it. And if you think about it from that lens, then the CDO starts working with the CTO from a technology lens, the COO from an operational lens, the CFO from a financial lens, the CMO from a marketing lens. So that person becomes a consultant for everyone. That's how I like to think about it. Denis, what's your relationship with those in broader technology? How do you go about building relationships?
Yeah, I agree. So the same way we have, the CPO looking after people, the chief people officer looking after one of the assets of the company, which is the most important one, people. We have someone looking after the money, as you were saying, Shira, with the money, the CFO. And we have the COO, for example, looking after the products. We have the CDO looking after the data. So it's another really important asset for a company to run. And I think we are just another customer from the CTO and the CIO. They provide technology, they provide the backend infrastructure, and we use it like the same way the rest of the team will use it. So I think that's the way we are moving. It's a tough journey and it's tough conversation, because sometimes the operations team, they want to hold on their licensings and the things over there, and they don't want to open it to us so we can use it. But it's little by little moving in that direction, I think. We are completely
perfect. 2 minutes to go. I'm going to ask you to give everybody a takeaway for free. And the takeaway is, if you're going to think about data over the next couple of years, 2 things to keep your eyes on, keep watching. What would be the trends and the things that you think are most important? Albert, over to you. 1 or 2 things, the trends that are coming, the things to stay closest to.
Yes, I think for me, it really is about but people, I know that we talk about, for example, topics such as, the data democratizations, data sharing and stuff. It's just really bringing all this data to make it easier, accessible for people to be used. So I think it's very, very important to see how new technologies come into even this space, but also how existing technology is starting to evolve to mold people into this. I think those are probably key things.
Shira, over to you. Top 2 things, trends to watch.
Invest in the outcomes and not in the technology, because the technology is advancing so fast that a lot of these things are commoditized. So focus on the outcomes and then work backwards. So that's the only recommendation I would have.
Denis?
Yeah, I always say data transformation is less about technology and more about people. So I'm going to be with Albert. Focus on the people, focus on feedback, understand if they are using the things that you're creating, understand if you're adding value to the business, and invest on their right training, and so you can create that journey and that momentum and bring that value to the business. Because I think the biggest challenge we are facing at the moment is showing the value. Like the oil we were talking about at the beginning, there is a lot of speculation in the market right now with how the cost of the people around data, especially in Australia with pandemic, and we don't have enough people. So it's really difficult now to show that ROI if the price of collecting that data and moving and transforming that data is going up.
Terrific. And Seychelle, your view, trends to watch.
Yeah, I think, we already see it coming fast and furious. There's only going to be more data. There's only going to be more automation, more robots that are coming. Like, get your foundation in place. Like, just focus on getting that foundation built. Don't think too far ahead. If the pandemic's taught us anything, is like good foundations can, last through anything. So think about, being cloud first. How are you moving that? How are you mastering your data, your governance? And do this just for your core assets. Get a foundation. Play with those MVPs, get the wins, have the data inform your bigger architecture and tech stack, and you can build from there. But focus small, and then you can scale and go big.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Daniel, I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for sharing. Thank you to CDOTrends too for having us. I hope everybody got something that they can take away. And on behalf of the panelists, thanks for joining, but also to the panelists, thanks for sharing so openly around your thoughts and giving advice to people listening. So thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, panel. That was a really excellent sort of wrap up. Very exciting.